my name is Katarzyna. I'm from Baltic Sea Culture Center from Gdańsk, and I will be your host today. Agnieszka Wołodźko will be providing you with all information, and I think that slowly we can start right now. If you have any question during all presentation, the chat is available, and you just put your question in the chat and we will try to answer all of your questions later. But after the presentation, there will be 15 minutes time frame for our conversation and discussion. Please keep it short. It's only 15 minutes, but I think we can handle it smoothly. Okay, so Agnieszka, the floor is yours.
Welcome everybody to the online conference, Placemaking for the Sustainable Living, Nature, Community, Art. My name is Agnieszka Wołodźko. I am the president of Cultures Beyond Culture Foundation and also the leader of the project Soft City Ecological Application of Cultural Values. This conference is organized just as part of the program Soft City, of the project Soft City. So I will say a few words about this project. It is more than 1 year long Polish-Danish collaboration between artistic circles from Gdańsk and Aarhus. In both cities, we experience a very similar situation with a post-shipyard area in Gdańsk and post-harbor area in Aarhus, which are intensively developed now, and new city districts are being built there. Both spaces are important social and cultural legacies due to their industrial and political past, and also to the fact that they were places of work for artists and many creative ventures for many years. Therefore, local artists want to become agents in these decision-making processes. In this project, we are looking at art as a ground for testing alternative futures. Soft City project is organized by the Royal Embassy, Danish Royal Embassy of Denmark in Warsaw, and co-financed by the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Danish Ministry of Culture. The two-day conference is organized in cooperation with the Arts and Media Division of the University of the West of Scotland and the Institute of Social Pedagogy at the University of Gdańsk and the Institute of Socio-Economic Geography and Special Management at the University of Gdańsk. I would like to thank both universities for this. The structure of our conference is next. It will last till 4:30 British time, 5:30 Central European time. It will be divided to two parts. The first part, titled Placemaking Holistic Approaches, will be convened and moderated by me, and it will consist of speeches by theoreticians. And after them, we will have 15 minutes discussion. After the discussion, we will have 15 minutes break, and then we will have the second part of the conference with artist approaches and practices. This part will be convened by my colleague Roman Sebastyanski. And after the artist presentations, we will again have a discussion that will last 20 minutes. And the whole conference will end at 4:30 British time, 5:30 Central European time. The text of the presentations will be published online on the website of the Soft City project, which is softcityorhusgdańsk.wordpress.com. Now we will start the first part of our conference. So it is, as I mentioned, entitled Placemaking Holistic Approaches. We will start with the first presentation now which the title of this is Holistic Approaches to Placemaking in Urban Context and the Role of the Art and the Role of Arts. And the presentation will be by Professor Katarzyna Kosmala, who is a writer, a curator, and chair in culture, media, and visual practice at the School of Business and Creative Industries at the University of the West of Scotland. Professor Kosmala researches and publishes in gender, power, and the politics of representation, heritage, and identity, culture, labor, and discourses of creativity and community in the context of a globalizing network society, as well as criticality of art production. Born in Poland, currently she lives in Edinburgh, Scotland. Professor Kosmala, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you all hear me okay? And can you see the slides okay? Yes, that's great. Thank you very much, Agnieszka, for wonderful introduction. And I'm really delighted to be here with you to start off this quite challenging topic, and especially in quite challenging times we live at the moment. So without any further delay, I would like to perhaps start with a little bit of a context. So the current condition we need to really acknowledge when we talk about the holistic placemaking and the role of arts. First of all, we live in the climate crisis emergency, and this is not the isolated crisis because it coupled with quite significant environmental disasters and degradation. And also in parallel, the power of extractive global capitalism, as well as cultural wars. You are very, very familiar. I mean, as we speak, this cultural work sometimes materialize in a much more global context, and especially in Europe at the moment, as we're having this webinar. There is a emergency global summit in Brussels taking place because of what's happening in the context of Europe, United States. So it is very precarious conditions in which we live at the moment. And it's very deeply embedded in the context of liberal individualism, which has quite a lot to do with all of those emergencies and crises I've just emphasized. And on the top of that, we have this increasing kind of power of virtuality in our worlds, and this idea of increasing disconnection. We are further and further disconnected from where we belong, from the nature, from the environment in which we are. So I would like to call for this kind of urgent need for first of all, to acknowledge this increasing sense of precarity in which we live, the precarity coupled with vulnerability, whether we talk about the wars, climate, environment, etc., etc. But also there is this need of rebalance. How do we value human existence and dignity of living, not only in a context of war and climate, but in general in our daily living? And that obviously brings us to this need for rewiring humanity back with nature. Very briefly, because we have only so many minutes, I just would like to kind of contextualize theoretically where I sit when I talk about precariousness of life and when I talk about livability. So this is the first dimension of theoretical framing for my presentation is Judith Butler, and especially her writings on both of those concepts, livability and precarity. Post 2000, she started to write quite significantly, on this idea of war and context of living. So taking from Butler's, we need to emphasize the dignity of living involves creating conditions where all life is valuable, is valued, and is worth of protection. So obviously her writings are predominantly linked with post 9/11 America and what happened onwards, and obviously that carries on to today's day and tomorrow. But in a context of our discussion, I want to expand it also to all life on Earth. And then secondly, we need to direct this attention to the conditions which maintain life. So Butler says there is no life without the conditions of life that sustain it. So that's really important for us. If we want to rewire with nature, we need to start thinking about these conditions of life which sustain life and living. So this idea of rethinking of life is that its condition for flourishing is enhanced by sociality more generally, by sociality and our being in daily life. So in this context, just to summarize, livability operates as a theoretical tool to illustrate that we cannot take this concept of a human or the idea of a human life for granted, because this is very much linked with the centrality of human and human role in anthropocentric domination, which obviously we all live in. So in that context, to take us further, our webinar is about holistic placemaking. So what is holistic? So first of all, before we start, let's bring us back to the idea of placemaking itself. So placemaking much more generally is very people-centered approach to planning. So it's an alternative to much more top-down exclusionary planning processes through its emphasis on community, co-production, perhaps grassrootsness, and kind of engagement with the public spaces. So people-centered approach, but in the same time, we need to recognize that the meaning and value of placemaking is very contextually and conceptually charged. So it is very fuzzy concept and it has been recognized lately in the literature, and it continues to be open to many interpretations. So when we talk about placemaking, we need to stop and think about it. What disciplines are we referring to? What geographies and locations are we talking about? What ideological framings we subscribe to when we talk about placemaking and temporality and time? So if we take all of that into consideration, how can we define holistic placemaking? In the context of our kind of needs for this webinar, I would like to focus on a placemaking which help us to reintegrate nature. So here wholeness really implies consideration for the entire human and urban ecosystem. So human is becoming one of elements. It's not ever again central in the kind of discussions of systems. So the recognition that humans are intertwined with environments, not controlling environments, not sustaining the environments as such. So it involves engaging with the infrastructures. We talk about placemaking in an urban context for this conference. So green spaces, as well as socioeconomic, cultural, and environmental aspects of our daily living, about this dignity of living, about social livability, and about precarity. I also want to acknowledge the importance of socioeconomic and cultural aspects, as well as environmental in parallel, if we talk about ecology of living. And so therefore, I want to argue that holistic placemaking, which seeks what we can call creation of assemblages out of multiple components, one in which none of them is more important than the other. So the action of gathering and fitting things together, so assembling things. And that brings me again that I need to go with you to the second set of theoretical constructs, because it is important. We need to really have conceptual background of what we are talking about. So this importance of rewiring and understanding what is assemblage and drawing especially from neo-material feminism. So first of all, there is this ontological shift to challenge this anthropocentric premise and recognize that we actually live in a world when the discourse of sustainability is very much silence about the power of the human and earth dimension. So there is how the human dimension is taking power and ruling over the earth dimension, if you like. Karen Barad notion of, I like this Karen Barad notion of ethico-ethno-epistemology, which knowledge of knowing and being is intertwined with the ethical dimension. So connecting us back to the idea and centrality of the ethics in the way we understand the existence. And then in relation to assemblage, if we think about this ontological and political shift in the way we understand and want to challenge the anthropocentrism, I want to draw on two concepts. First of all, Deleuze and Guattari assemblage and their writing on relationality and importance of relationality, which couple with this idea of affect, but affect not necessarily as linking with the human emotion or human feeling as such, but the ability of all of us affecting and being affected by encounters with others and other bodies. And then if we link back to the material feminism or this kind of novel approaches to material feminism, we can talk about the agency of the matter, especially from Donna Haraway. We talk about the all matter as an outcome of contingents and productive relations. So all matter matters in a way. And this relationality of all agencies needs to be linked to the affective encounters between human matter and all other entities, such as tools, machines, etc., if we want to draw on Haraway, or much more earthly, kind of like ecosystemic dimensions, such as rock plants, like biospheres, drawing from Bennett, for instance. And I really like this idea. I remember my first point, which I make of this idea of liberal individualism, all of that, the role of it. So if we talk about this ontological shift, we need to think about becoming nature cultural. And this is why this idea of an artist come into play, nature cultural. And that's come from this new writing by Ergen and Callas from organizational studies, when they talk about the assembling process of more than human. Yes, so on one dimension it's more than human, but on the other is more than capitalist entanglement of things. So they are not more than human or more than capitalist, but all together in simultaneously. And I think that's very important for us. If we really want to take this seriously, this idea of political ontology, where sustainability is no longer about only biological and physiological environments like trees, rocks, or only human and the ecosystems and economic production like capitalist consumerism. But if we really want to talk about symbiosis, I don't know, Agnieszka, how much more time do I have? So 5 minutes? Yes, okay. So very briefly, just to kind of illustrate what I mean by the assemblage as a kind of like creative metaphor, I use this notion of creative garden. So artists and deep reconnection with nature, but not garden as a kind of idea of a man and again toiling in the soil, which is also important, but more as a creative garden assemblage, assembling things together. And I have 3 examples. First of all is Ian Hamilton Finlay Little Sparta, which is created in collaboration with his wife Sue Finlay in the forests and moorlands of Pentlands Hills in Scotland. The second example is Derek Jeremiah Gardens Cottage, located near the decommissioned nuclear power station in Dundness in Kent. And closer to home as well is the community-run local natural reserve, which is called Hamilton Hill Clay Pits, which involve quite a lot of artists and activists on post-industrial site in Glasgow. So this is the first example, Little Sparta of Ian Hamilton Finlay, just to give you an idea what it looks like. And why it is important, because his artistic philosophy was deeply rooted in the integration of various media and interplay between language, art, and nature. So environmental design, it brings here art and nature together. So garden integrate natural elements of artistic expression, which creates much more harmonious landscape that changes with changes of the season. So it's this idea of kind of like letting things be as they naturally are. But what is very important is on this site, there used to be a series of farm buildings. So over many years, in partnership with his wife, Sue Finlay, he began to create this garden across 7 acres of wildlife and wildland, exposing the moorland site. And the creation of that garden has very much transformed the ecology of the site and environment over the last 50 years. So it became like on one hand side, we have this 2-hectare, if you think about European terms, more like Arcadian kind of art garden when you can pardon and visit as a meditative space. But on the other hand side, you have this biodiverse heaven, which now unexpectedly, it has been counted in 2002. So, like a couple of years ago, data showed that high diversity of mosses has been actually discovered there, and more than 74 species of moths, which is quite unusual for this type of locations, and some of them which has not been cited before. So this is the kind of idea of the work which is done there by volunteers about the counting species and engaging young people, older people, whole communities in kind of looking at the change, biodiverse change of what happened in the site. So that's just very briefly the first example. That's the second example here, just to give you a picture. So the Prospect Cottage. So Derek Germans, for some of you who don't know, it's a kind of very well-known artist and filmmakers and also gay activist who in 1866 moved to Fisherman Cottage and make very unique garden then. So while he actually rebuilt and recreated and reconstructed the cottage, he started to create this massive unique garden, really in a very near vicinity on the commission nuclear power station near Kent. And it's a mixture very much of the sculptures which are assembled from the driftwood and the found objects from the nearby beach. So this idea of a nearby as a kind of like an environmental resource for the garden. And whatever he could find which could survive the coastal weather there. So the garden acted as a both garden, so the kind of sustainability of living, the vegetables and herbs, but also as a shelter and a sanctuary. I think it's interesting dimension when you talk livability and dignity of living. We need to also think about dignity of death, for instance, human dying. So German lived in darkness for last 8 years of his life when he was diagnosed with AIDS-related illness, and he gradually deteriorated when he was cared by his partner and died there in 1994. It was his conscious decision. He didn't want to be disconnected further from nature, from environment, and die in a hospice on a very, particular environment, which is, with tubes and disconnection. He preferred to be.
Catherine, you have only 1 minute left.
That's perfect.
And you have questions in the chats. So I'll extend another minute.
Okay,
but then please
perfect.
try to wrap up. Yeah.
Yes,
thanks.
perfect. So, so it is important that when we talk about dignity, we talk about dignity in a holistic way. So that's another example of a dwelling space and meditative place, but also idea of a dignity of living and dying, but also as organic foil to very post-industrial barren landscape. And this, again, as a resident space, so nowadays used for artists, researchers, and writers as a kind of a creative space to work with. So that's just another examples of the cottage to show you. And that's you can see in the distance how close is the nuclear power plant in a vicinity with the garden. So it's also kind of interesting how it actually merges with the nature of this post-industrial. And very quickly, Hamilton Clay Pits. It's a community-run local reserve, as I saw on post-industrial site in northern west of Glasgow. It's run mostly by volunteers and artists. But the idea of art and heritage with nature as a working towards policy, how to care and enhance wildlife of the clay pits, very kind of, rundown area for over 40 years. Promoting it as a meeting space, as a running, cycling, fishing, etc. It's a stunning transformation, and it's very much in an inner city natural reserve. So you can see here the connection of the bridge in the center, and also because of the hill, you can see amazing view. of
we
the
have
glass.
to stop now because
Perfect.
we are running out of time.
Okay, thank you. So that's my concluding slide. So you can see creative stamps serve very much as a catalyst, not only for socio-natural cohesion, but also cultural expression, environmental stewardship, but also learning and sharing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yes, we have some questions, but we will keep them now and keep for the discussion that will come after the 4 presentations. And now we give the floor to Professor Maria Mendel. She will have a presentation titled On Tenderness in the Anthropocene. Professor Maria Mendel works at the Institute of Education Faculty of Social Sciences at University of Gdańsk. She also teaches a doctoral program at the Academy of Fine Arts in Gdańsk. Her work focuses on social pedagogy and sociology of education, particularly on the relations between subjectivity, memory, and space. She has also conducted research on place-conscious education and citizenship, memory, place, and identity, adult education and lifelong learning, and parental engagement in schools. Yes, so it's your floor now, Professor Mendel.
Thank you very much, Agnieszka. Thank you all for joining this wonderful conference, for your voices, for your wisdom. I'm very happy and glad to having this possibility to articulate my voice as a contribution to this common thought under umbrella of this very urgent issue, such as placemaking for sustainable living. Thanks so much for invitation. You know my abstract, so I'm only reminding that the postulate of a tender condition of coexistence breaks down anthropocentrism and moving beyond the humanism. There is also an ethical imperative to take action and to make a change in our humans' relations to the natural environment. So there are also some references I was publishing for years while thinking about tenderness and Anthropocene, and trying to create some pedagogical educational thought basing on such categories as I have mentioned, posthumanism, new materialism, but first of all, new ontologies of becoming, so to say. Starting with the Anthropocene, sorry. Let's say that, in my opinion, I'm basing on Mateusz Borowski and some others. In my opinion, the Anthropocene is not a historical moment in which the agency of humans or capital, as Katarzyna Kosmala has mentioned, has exceeded the great forces of nature. But this is an emergent effect of relations connecting humans with non-humans within nature cultural assemblages. That was mentioned also by Professor Kosmala. So the most decisive argument lies in thinking about agency. So agency, it is something which is meant here like entanglements, like some connections, living connections. I really like Karen Barad. We have, Katarzyna, a lot of common grounds, common references. So Karen Barad is one of our both favorite authors. So such the entanglements, such the connections, such relations are called by Barad as interactions. So I'm very involved in analyzing of them. And saying something at a level of theoretical reflection, this all means that the ontology of individual entities is being replaced nowadays under umbrella of neo-humanism, post-humanism, etc., is being replaced by various forms of relational ontology, as Deleuze and Guattari said in the 80s, ontology of becoming. And this conceptual move is the condition for the possibility of properly understanding the Anthropocene. So I understand Anthropocene through this meaning, through this looking for some new relational ontologies through this conceptual move. I'm also looking for such relational ontology that could be a possibly sensible ecology of the planet. So I'm really daring for do this because we have no time, and I'm getting more and more brave in articulating my thesis and my arguments, because it seems to me that we all, the academics, the people involved in doing some change, we have to articulate our thesis much more loudly nowadays. This is the last moment, in my opinion. So talking about relational ontology, let's say that space, affect, and tenderness are interplaying in my conceptual work. Relations are first and foremost spatial and then affective. So I'm working, so to say, under umbrella of two terms, this spatial one and affective one as well. That's why my grant is full of the authors who were already mentioned by Katarzyna Kosmala. So I'm really widely using Deleuze-Guattari's rhizomatic approach, but also Louis Althusser's theory of the meeting. So networks, existence in material encounters, such as Epicurus and Lucretius Clinamen. This is very important for me. But also, as sociologist Norbert Elias said, I'm very much involved in analyzing some physical figurations. He said configurations when we have more elements. And I'm trying to retell his Elias's theory of open human being, of open people, homine aperti. I'm trying to redefine it while thinking about symbiotic community, humans and not humans. And this is also interesting for me, Donald Winnicott and his assumption that the living and agentic I is not enclosed in a bag called skin. We are always in the never-ending movement. We are living. This means we are interplaying with never-ending going connections. And great philosopher of education, Herr Vista, said, I live by going out into the world, not by simply being in it. It is close to fantastic philosophy of living by François Julien, who creates some kind of ontology without ontology, and saying that I live by living simply, not by being. So Julien is very inspiring for me. I'm strongly recommending his works for you. And moving towards new relational ontology, or how to retell being, let's move to Olga Tokarczuk, Polish writer and Nobel Prize winner in 2018. She proposed the psychology of the narrator, which is absolutely great as a socio-cultural theory, responsive to the crisis time in which it was created. This narrator's psychology is based on the estimation of the world in which we all act, by Tokarczuk, who said in her Nobel Prize speech, there is something wrong with this world. We have to do something with this. So this is most important for me, that Tokarczuk said, while presenting this her psychology of the narrator, this is somebody who withdraws to make room for infinite potentiality, to make room. I love this, and this is like an engine for my arguments. Tokarczuk's fourth person narrator is a tender narrator. Such a narrator who is spatial, he acts spatially, and who is able to affect and able to be affected, as the lesson what Tari said. But most important is that he gives space, shrinks himself, herself, and letting the air out of himself, which in the culture where tucking the ego has become a great value can be very difficult, as Tokarczuk notes. The fourth-person narrative is, in my opinion, learning responsibility for the entire common world. And also an education, I'm a pedagogue, an education towards the practice of seeing everything, and the lesson of being responsible for such everything. Tender narrator in Tokarczuk's way of thinking acts like a sensitive radar. She described him while thinking about her childhood. Perhaps you remember Tokarczuk's Nobel speech. This is, you see on the slide, very important fragment in which she describes her feelings and her thought accompanying these feelings, thoughts about waiting for some potentiality for everything. It was about a picture of her mother, pregnant mother, who, like a sensitive radar, penetrated the infinite realms of the cosmos, trying to find out when little Olga would arrive and from where. So in the light of this tenderness, following Tokarczuk, is the art of personifying, of sharing feelings, and thus endlessly discovering similarities. She put great emphasis on discovering similarities, not differences, similarities. This is something which makes commonality and our common space, shared space. Tenderness is the most modest form of love. It's spontaneous and disinterested. It goes beyond empathetic fellow feeling. It's the conscious, deep emotional concert about another being. This is a fragility. Tenderness also recognizes the bonds that connect us. So this is something about the world as being alive, living, interconnected, cooperating with, and codependent on itself.
We have to finish.
Yeah, sorry. So I wrote a lot about art as standard public pedagogy, which means pedagogy of everybody. So I have analyzed pieces of art of Sławomir Lipnicki. You have here some quotes from Agnieszka Wołodźko's description of Lipnicki's project Olympics, the Narcissus. It's one of the most important examples of radar-like sensitivity and tender narratives via artistic sources. Another example.
We have to finish. We have to finish.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So thank you so much. We'll be back to these issues during discussion. Thank you so much. Sorry for.
Thank you very much. And now we give the floor to the third presentation by Dr. Klaudia Nowicka. The presentation titled Community Placemaking, One Step Further, What If? Dr. Klaudia Nowicka is an assistant professor at the University of Socio-Economic Geography and Special Management, Faculty of Social Sciences at University of Gdańsk. Her research focuses on social and spatial studies, particularly in the areas of public participation, culture, and tourism. Welcome.
Thank you for introducing me so nicely. And I've been listening to my former two speakers with a big smile on my face, as I already now know, knowing what I have in my presentation, that we are really coherent. And it is really nice to see that there are so many people who would like to think just as me. So now, as a geographer, I would like to tell you about community placemaking, but with a little twist. So I just need to change this view as I cannot see where. Okay, it's here. 1 minute. Okay, there's something wrong with my presentation. 1 minute. I'll just change it. Okay. Okay, now we are ready. So, placemaking is definitely not a new idea, as we already know, and some of the thinking behind placemaking gained traction in the early 1960s, when two people, Jane Jacobs and William Hollingsworth White, introduced groundbreaking ideas about designing cities for people, not just cars and shopping centers as it used to be. What actually hampers us to become a change may be the feeling that we are not experts in the field. But the example of Jane Jacobs, and that is why I'm starting from her, shows that you don't have to be an urban planner or scientist to do so. Jacobs had no professional training in the field of city planning, nor did she hold the title of planner. She was just a journalist. Instead, she relied on her observations and common sense to show why certain places work and what can be done to improve those that do not. Together with her mentor, if she needed one, William White, Jacobs led the way in advocating for a place-based, community-centered approach to urban planning decades before such approaches were even considered sensible. With community-based participation at its center, an effective placemaking process capitalizes on a local community's assets, inspiration, and potential. And it results in the creation of quality public spaces that contribute to people's health, happiness, and well-being. But the question I would like to ask is, are we humans really happy and healthy and well being alone and surrounded by concrete? Well, I think that it is disputable, and for now I am living this just like that. And usually personal confession is not a good idea, but why not to start with a skeleton in the cupboard when we can hope for the best in the future? So I have to admit I am a coward. Definitely not as daring as Jane Jacobs, as in the introduction to her famous work, The Death and Life of Great American Cities, she claims that her book is actually an attack on current city planning and rebuilding. Well, this presentation is definitely not an attack. I am not that brave, but I dare to have dreams, as we all do. So now, more than 60 years after Jane Jacobs' manifesto, maybe it's time to expand the first brilliant idea. What about designing cities not just for cars, shopping centers, not just for people, but for all living creatures that we share urban areas with? I started with one of the oldest and largest organizations focused on placemaking, and it is Project for Public Spaces that has been helping communities since 1975. And its members state that for them, placemaking is both a process and a philosophy. So they well share the same thinking as we do. Placed in the US, the Project for Public Spaces has already worked with more than 3,500 communities or so in states and in over 50 other countries worldwide. So we may assume that they do know what they are doing. And the experience they gathered allowed them to identify 11 key elements in transforming public spaces into vibrant community places. So, as we already know, thanks to brilliant Professor Mendel's and Professor Kosmala's presentations, for us, community is not just people. So what would happen if we challenge these key elements by expanding the idea of community that they are based on? Let's see. It is my first attempt. As I have only 15 minutes to present this idea, I will focus only on the right side of the slide where you can find the PPS key elements a bit altered, and you can see my alternation in green and blue, while the original version is on the left. In some cases, I had to shorten the original version to make it more transparent and clear, suitable for the purpose of this presentation. But in the full text that I will provide on the project website, you will find the full versions, as I don't consider this to be finished work. Maybe we'll have a chance to work on it together later. So the first key element is the notion that the community is the expert. And as you can see, we don't have to change a lot to fit this into our idea of what a community is. Here, the most important change, as I see it now, is adding that in any community, there are people and other creatures who have the ability to help the area to function properly on many different levels. Like, for example, trees reducing the ambient temperature. The second postulate is that we have to keep in mind all the time that we are supposed to create place. A place where each and every member of the community is welcomed and comfortable. Of course, this place should have a consistent and aesthetic design, be safe, but when designing such a space, we should always consider the articulated needs of the community, and everything that makes up this space should add up to something more than the sum of its simple parts. Of course, we can't do it alone, and not every member of the community, as we see it, has the ability to speak for themselves, literally. So partners are critical to the future success. They can not only be local institutions, museums, and schools, as the PPS says, but also environmentalists, biologists, artists, and other experts that can advocate for those creatures that are not able to articulate their needs. We do know that such people exist and really have well-being of all living creatures in mind. For example, the list of animal rights advocates is long, and I've checked, it contains hundreds of people of many different professions. Well-known Jane Goodall, Brian Adams, or maybe less known Oscar Horta, an animal activist and moral philosopher who is currently a university professor in Spain and one of the co-founders of the organization Animal Ethics. And the fact that we are here is also a proof that there are people who actually care. That is a good one. You can see a lot just by observing. Here we return to my beloved Jane Jacobs. And here we don't need to change much. Just shifting the focus is enough for us, and saying that by looking at how people and other creatures are using or not using spaces and finding out what they actually like and don't like about them, it is possible to assess what makes them work or not work. And again, just as Jane Jacobs, you don't have to be a professional to observe and learn. You can be a child to do so. And there are examples of such projects that have already been implemented, like, for example, Project Wild Thing, which may be a good example of how to do so. The fifth key element identified by the PPS states that we need a vision. And believe me, this vision will come to us as soon as we become aware that we are not alone. Through education, observations, as I already said, or projects like this one, or simple campaigns, we can raise this awareness. This vision assumes that we should be proud of what we accomplished, of the place we have created, of the fact that we are human enough, tender enough to share our space with our smaller brothers. But sometimes it happens that this vision can overwhelm us. It may seem like there is so much to do that we won't manage. And you know what? We actually don't have to. Here, the start with the petunias advice is absolutely crucial. We don't have to buy designer urban beehives or bird feeders that cost a fortune. And believe me, I've checked. We can start with reusing things that are already in our possession. This is where artists with endless creativity can come to the rescue and bring their visions to life. And one more thing, sharing space with non-human creatures is not that simple. And although I believe we all are optimists, surely I am, we have to be aware that it may not work for every community. So starting with cheap and temporary solutions is a good idea here, a good idea to start. Now, about triangulation. It is the process by which some external stimulus provides a linkage between people and prompts strangers to talk to other strangers as if they knew each other their whole life. This is more or less the definition by Holly White. And on a broader level, maybe if we add some elements of architecture for other urban dwellers, non-human ones, which allow people to observe them and benefit from their presence, they will gradually connect and create a real community that we have in mind, of course. The eighth key element is, they say, it can't be done. We also have to remember that professionals such as traffic engineers, transit operators, urban planners, and architects, they all have narrow definitions of the job. Facilitating traffic, making buses run on time, or designing buildings. And that is perfectly fine. Their job is not to create places as we understand them, or establish communities as we want them to be. The community that wants to carve out a place for itself has to be aware that it is not enough to rely on the outsiders, because they may say it can't be done and it's finished. The community, the aware community, has to operate and work hard enough to prove them that they are wrong. On the other hand, the outsiders, they are really, really important. Volunteer experts, environmentalists, or other advocates of the Mother Nature can help to overcome obstacles because we need their experience and knowledge. So in some places, we just have to introduce them when we don't have them in our community. The ninth element itself does not have to be altered. As you can see, I left it same. The original version states that the input from the community and potential partners, the understanding of how other spaces function, the experimentation and overcoming the obstacles and naysayers provides the concept for the space. Although design is important, these other elements tell you what form you need to accomplish the future vision for the space. And here for us, the foundation is again the actual awareness how we understand the community, and having in mind that not only people are part of it, seeing everything and being responsible, as Olga Tokarczuk said. Well, money is not the issue, they say. Maybe not, but in many cases, we do know that it is.
We have to finish. We have to
finish now. Okay, this is the last one. Just when we know and we realize for what we are actually paying, it is worth it. And the last one, we are never finished. So I hope that the idea of extending the concept of community placemaking is also a work unfinished. As for now, acting on behalf of all, this is our human responsibility to other not urban dwellers. And thank you very much. Hopefully during the workshop planned as part of the agenda of Soft City project, we will have the opportunity to work on this idea, not only in theory as I am, but also in practice. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you. We are hoping for that too. And now the last theoretical presentation will be done by Roman Sebastyanski and titled Art as Placemaking Community Process. Roman Sebastyanski is an architect, urban planner, and urban manager. Since 2000, engaged in urban regeneration of the former Gdańsk shipyard area, cooperating with municipality of Gdańsk, a private developer, as well as with local activists and artists. Currently, he's completing practice-based PhD studies at the University of the West Scotland on the role of critical art in the participative urban planning. Roman, the floor is yours. Roman? Where is Roman?
I don't see him.
Roman?
Maybe he's muted.
He is mute. Roman?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I will mute it.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. So let me present the concept of art as process and not only an object. Few initial remarks. This is not the only concept of art. There are some others, but for the time reason, I will not deal with them and judge which one is better and why. However, there are some important features which differentiate the kind of art as process from other simply performative arts like some of music, theater, dance, etc. So first of all, it is holistic, considers and treats reality as a continual whole of community, time, and space. It has political intention to influence, impact, change, or transform the whole of reality. It is dialogic as a mutual exchange of information, of knowledge, and thus it is communication. And finally, it is experimental, it's improvised. It is not my concept, and it is not a new one. In the Western civilization, it can be traced back to the ancient Greece with the Aristotelian phronesis as its closest elaboration in the social, cultural context. Also related to polis as a concept and practice of human community. In the modern times, such concept was introduced by Kurt Lewin in 1940s as a participative action research. In art, it was introduced by Guy Debord and situationists in 1950s as creating situations or new urbanism, since they referred mainly to the urban contexts. In this presentation, I will refer only to the last one, specifically and intentionally considered as art. However, as probably some of you will feel it, my conceptualization of the situationist art as process will resonate closely with the philosophical concept of rhizome, introduced in 1970s and 80s by Gilles Deleuze and Félix Guattari. For the time reason, however, I will not elaborate it, but somehow keep this relation or connection hidden between the words. Okay, so this is for now, this is our general framework to start with. And within this framework, ethically good art as process is an intentional, political, and experimental action, or rather reaction on the whole of communal time space to influence and to change it. Communal time space as one phrase is interconnected, linked, and continuous reality, continuous wholeness of various interconnected dynamic components of factors, because they are dynamic. So they are like factors or even vectors. Now I will conceptualize each of these three basic interconnected dynamic components of reality, community, time, and space, or space, community, and time, whatever, keeping in mind the mutual interconnectedness. I begin with the community as a whole, since in my opinion, this is, in my opinion, a subject linked with this dualism of time and space. The first component, the time or the whole community in the lived time space, is not divided, separated into parts, is interconnected and continuous, is also inclusive, not excluding any being from common being, from living, is belonging to all interconnected beings, linking flora and fauna, including humans. So when artists say we want to intentionally and politically change, transform reality, they need to practically think of whom, whose reality, whose life, who belong to this reality of a given time space, who form a balanced, healthy living community, and how, etc. All of these very important ethical questions cannot be known in advance. They need to be asked in common, in public, to collectively search for the ethical answers or solutions. Hence, this process is an experiment of collective communal searching for the right or good change, transformation of the whole community in a lived communal time space. The second component of reality, the whole time of community in a lived space, is also not divided, separated into parts of past, present, and future, is interconnected and continuous, is also inclusive, not excluding any part of communal time from common being, from becoming, linking past with present and future continuously. Past is remembered, present is lived, future is imagined, is desired, not simply predicted. So again, when artists say our political intention is to change, transform reality, they need to practically think when to start, when this reality starts or started. How communal past in a given communal space influences and modulates the communal presence and influences the imagined, desired communal future. What is important in the communal past that should be remembered and take part, participate in transforming communal present into a communal future? Who should decide on that and how? Etc. So again, all of these very important ethical questions cannot be known in advance. They need to be asked in common, in public, to collectively search for the ethical answers. Hence, this process is an experiment of collective communal searching for the right, good change or transformation of the communal time in the communal space. And the last, final, third component or factor of the reality, which is whole space,